That's the story I'm about to tell you today. And believe me, it is not what you think, because when she pointed at my Jeep, screaming in the middle of the street, I stayed calm, arms crossed, while the whole neighborhood stopped to watch. Letters, fines, threats. It all built up to one moment, when her power was about to break forever, and the secret behind my Jeep finally came out. Welcome back to HOA Stories, where the perfect suburbs hide the ugliest battles. My name is Daniel. I live in a quiet lakeside neighborhood in the Midwest. On the outside, it looks peaceful. But inside these streets, the HOA rules like a shadow government. I work as a federal officer, but at home, I'm just another homeowner trying to live in peace, until Karen, the HOA president, decided my Jeep was her next war. I never thought parking my own Jeep in my own driveway could cause a war. But when you live under an HOA, every little thing becomes a battle. My neighborhood looks peaceful. A line of perfect houses, lawns trimmed like green carpets, mailboxes polished until they shine. On summer evenings, the air smells like barbecue and freshly cut grass. It feels like paradise. But paradise has rules, and the rules have teeth. The HOA president, Karen, lived 3 houses down from me. You could spot her from a mile away, always dressed like she was heading to court, hair sprayed so hard it never moved that clipboard never left her hands. She walked the streets like a sheriff patrolling her town, except her badge was the HOA rulebook, and she loved to use it. At first, I ignored her. I worked long hours. My job was demanding, and when I came home, all I wanted was peace. The Jeep was part of my work, but I didn't brag about it. I didn't tell neighbors what I really did. To them, I was just Daniel, the guy with the green Jeep. It's that way. Quiet. Simple. But Karen, she didn't see it like that. The first note showed up on a Monday morning, tucked under my wiper. Bright pink. Impossible to miss. Violation. Vehicle not approved for driveway parking. I remember standing there, coffee in one hand, the note in the other. I laughed. It felt like a joke, but it wasn't, because the next day, there was another one, and the day after that, another, soon. The whispers started. Neighbors watering their flowers would glance at me. One waved awkwardly, then looked away. Another shook his head like I had committed a crime. I could feel the judgment, not for something big, not for something criminal, but for parking my Jeep in front of my own house. Karen didn't stop there. She came to my door one evening, heels sharp against the driveway. She didn't even knock, just pointed at the Jeep like it had personally insulted her. "You need to move this car, now," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. I crossed my arms, leaned against the doorframe. "No," I said. Her smile stretched, but her eyes never smiled. "We'll see about that," she whispered, and turned back down the street. That's when the real war began. The letters kept coming. The fines doubled. Threats of towing appeared on bright yellow stickers. One morning, I found Karen standing on the sidewalk with 2 other board members, all 3 of them staring at my Jeep, writing notes like detectives at a crime scene. It was surreal. Here I was, serving my country in ways they would never understand. And I was being treated like a criminal for owning a vehicle, but I kept calm because I knew something they didn't. The Jeep wasn't just mine, it belonged to the federal task force. Every bolt, every wire, every hidden compartment had a purpose, and if they ever dared touch it, they wouldn't just be breaking HOA rules, they'd be crossing into something much bigger. Still, the pettiness continued. Karen started calling emergency board meetings. She even spoke to neighbors, trying to rally them against me. "Do you want a monster truck ruining property values?" she would say. "Do you want the neighborhood looking like a parking lot?" People nodded, not because they agreed, but because no one wanted to be her next target. I kept quiet. But inside, I was boiling. Each note, each fine, each glare from her window at night. It was pushing me closer to the edge, but I waited because timing is everything, and I knew, sooner or later, she'd push too far. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. The air was warm. Kids were riding bikes. Sprinklers spraying rainbows across lawns. I stepped outside with my coffee, and there she was, Karen, marching across the street with two board members behind her. Her heels clicked like a countdown clock. She stopped in front of my Jeep, pointed her finger at me, and shouted loud enough for the whole block to hear. "Move this car now, or it will be towed before sunset." Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. A man paused mid-lawnmower, his engine humming quietly. The kids stopped riding their bikes. The whole world seemed to freeze on that one moment. I leaned against the Jeep, calm, collected, arms crossed, eyes locked on hers, and I said nothing. That silence, it drove her mad. Her face reddened, her hands shook. She turned to the board members. "Write him up. Triple the fines. Call the tow truck," she snapped. But here's what she didn't know. The Jeep wasn't just a Jeep. It was wired, tagged, and tracked. It was federal property, and if anyone touched it, they'd trigger alarms far bigger than a neighborhood dispute. I watched her scribble on her clipboard, neighbors whispering, phones recording, and I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about every homeowner she had bullied, every neighbor she had fined, every petty rule she had. It twisted to make herself feel powerful. I smiled quietly, because I knew the day of reckoning was coming. And when it did, her little empire of pink notes and threats would crumble. I stayed calm that day. Even though my blood was boiling under the surface, even though every instinct in me wanted to shout back, to tell her exactly who I was and what this Jeep really meant. But I didn't, because silence is sometimes louder than words. Karen thought she had won that round. She strutted away with her board members like a queen after battle. Her heels clicked on the pavement, sharp, proud. But I noticed something. The neighbors weren't clapping for her. They weren't cheering her on. They were quiet, watching, and I could feel it. Their loyalty was slipping. Still, she doubled down. That week I found 3 more violations taped to my door. Failure to comply, refusal to move vehicle, disrupting neighborhood aesthetic. It was almost funny. My Jeep was parked neatly in my own driveway. It wasn't leaking oil. It wasn't blocking traffic. It wasn't blasting music. But according to her, it was destroying property values. And in her mind, that was worse than a crime. The fines grew bigger, $50, then $100, then $250. At first I laughed, but then I realized she wasn't just trying to move the Jeep. She was trying to break me financially, to squeeze until I gave in. I could see it in her eyes whenever we crossed paths. That smug little smirk, like she already imagined me selling the Jeep, begging for forgiveness. She wanted control, and control was something I refused to give her. The neighborhood started to divide. Some people whispered encouragement when Karen wasn't around. Others avoided me like I was cursed. One old man down the street stopped me while I was walking my dog. "Son, don't fight them," he said quietly. "They'll bury you in paperwork. Trust me." "I know," his voice. He cracked when he said it, like he had lived through the same war once before. And lost. But I wasn't him. I wasn't going to roll over. One evening, I caught Karen outside. She was standing by her mailbox with 2 women from the board. They were laughing, but the laughter was sharp, the kind of laugh you hear in courtrooms or at funerals. I slowed down, just enough to listen. "He thinks he's above the rules," one of them said. Karen's eyes narrowed as she replied, "Let him think that. I'll make an example out of him." An example. That word burned into my chest, because this wasn't about a Jeep anymore. This was about power, her power, and my refusal to kneel before it. Days passed. Tension grew. I started noticing little things. Trash cans left tipped over in my yard, sprinklers mysteriously broken, a neighbor suddenly complaining that my grass was too long, even though it wasn't. It was subtle. But it was war, a quiet war, the kind fought with notes and whispers instead of fists and guns. But the storm was coming, and I could feel it. The breaking point arrived one Friday evening. The sun was setting, painting the lake orange and gold. Kids were still out playing, families grilling burgers, and that's when a tow truck turned the corner, slow, heavy, its lights flashing silently. It rolled right toward my driveway, and behind it, Karen stood with her clipboard. Her eyes sparkled like she had finally won. Neighbors came outside, some with phones recording, others with arms crossed, waiting for the show. The tow truck rumbled to a stop in front of my Jeep. The driver hopped out, looked at Karen, then looked at me. "Which one?" he asked. Karen pointed like a queen ordering an execution. "That one, the green Jeep." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just leaned against the hood, calm as ever. The driver hesitated. He scratched his head, looked again at Karen, then at me, and that's when I spoke. "You might want to be careful," I said quietly. "This isn't just any Jeep," Karen scoffed. "Oh, please, don't. Try to scare him with your little stories." The driver frowned, looked at me again. "What do you mean?" he asked. I smiled. Slow, steady. "Let's just say, if you hook this vehicle up, you'll be getting a call you don't want to answer." The crowd murmured. Phones zoomed in closer. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "He's bluffing," she hissed. But the driver wasn't so sure. He circled the Jeep slowly, examining the plates, the decals. Then his face changed. Confusion. Then unease. "Wait, is this government property?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just crossed my arms tighter. And that silence told him everything. The driver backed away from the Jeep. "Sorry, lady. I'm not touching this one," he said. Karen's face went pale. "What do you mean you're not touching it? I'm the HOA president." But the driver shook his head. "Not my problem. I'm not risking federal trouble for your parking drama." He climbed back into his truck, and within seconds the rumble of the engine faded down the street. Karen was left standing there, clipboard trembling in her hands. The neighbors whispered louder now. Some even laughed quietly, and for the first time, I saw cracks in her armor, but she wasn't finished. Oh no. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. If anything, the embarrassment made her even more dangerous. That night, I saw her blinds move again, that familiar flicker of her eyes spying on my house. It was almost midnight, but she was there, watching, and I knew she was planning her next move. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far she would go. Would she try another tow? Would she push the board for legal action? Would she start targeting my job, my reputation? The thought didn't scare me. It excited me, because I knew, sooner or later, the truth would come out. And when it did, the entire neighborhood would see exactly who Karen had picked a fight with. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee. Neighbors waved at me, some with respect in their eyes, others with curiosity, like they wanted answers but didn't dare ask. And Karen, she stood by her window again, her glare sharper than ever. I smiled, because the game was far from over, and deep down, I almost wanted her to try again, because the bigger she made this, the harder she would fall that night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blinds, that narrow slit of light from across the street, and I knew she was there, watching, waiting, planning. Karen didn't lose well. I could tell from the way she marched, the way her smile stretched tight, but her eyes twitched with anger. The tow truck failure wasn't the end for her. It was only fuel. By Monday morning, a new letter appeared on my door. Not pink, not yellow, but thick, official-looking, stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a threat. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation. Legal escalation. That was her big move now. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter spread in front of me, coffee cooling in my hand. She thought paper could scare me. She thought signatures and seals could break me, but she didn't understand. I lived in a world where threats came with real bullets, where silence in an alley could mean life or death, and here she was, thinking a letter could undo me. Still, it made me wonder, how far would she really go? Would she drag me into court over a Jeep? Would she drain HOA funds just to feed her obsession? Knowing Karen, yes, she would. That week, the neighborhood grew colder. Neighbors who once waved now kept their distance. Some crossed the street to avoid me. Others whispered when I passed. I could almost hear the words. Why doesn't he just move it? Why risk it? But none of them knew the truth. They couldn't. And that truth was the only thing keeping me calm. The fines stacked up. The threats grew louder. Every day the tension thickened like a storm claw. Out over the cul-de-sac. Then came Wednesday evening. I had just pulled into my driveway. the Jeep humming low. When I saw Karen waiting, arms crossed, clipboard hugged to her chest, 2 board members flanked her like bodyguards. Her lipstick was sharper than her smile, and her eyes locked on me like crosshairs. I stepped out slowly, shut the door. She wasted no time. "You're out of chances," she snapped. "This is your final notice. Move the Jeep, or the HOA will take legal action. We will not allow this neighborhood to be held hostage by your stubbornness." I leaned against the Jeep. Calm as ever, her words rolled over me like wind, but the crowd gathering behind her, that got my attention. Neighbors stood on lawns, on porches, some with arms folded, others with phones ready to record. Everyone wanted a show, and Karen was ready to deliver. I smiled slowly. "Funny," I said, "because I thought this neighborhood was supposed to feel like home. Doesn't really feel like home when you're being threatened every day, does it?" Karen's smirk deepened. "This isn't about home. This is about order. Rules exist for a reason. If we let you break them, everyone else will think they can break them too." Her voice carried down the street. The board members nodded. The crowd murmured. But I saw something else too. Doubt, tiny cracks in the wall she had built. People shifting uncomfortably because deep down, they knew she wasn't fighting for order. She was fighting for control. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I stepped closer. "You really think this is about rules?" I asked quietly. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she barked louder. "Yes, and you will obey them, or you will regret it." The threat echoed through the street. The children stopped playing. The dogs stopped barking. Even the sprinklers seemed to go quiet. I looked at her clipboard, the weapon she carried everywhere, covered in notes, fines, signatures, her little sword of paper and ink. I almost laughed, but instead, I leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "Karen, you don't want to go down this road. Trust me." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" she hissed. I shook my head slowly. "No, it's a warning." Her face burned red. She turned back to the crowd, her voice rising. "Do you all hear this? He thinks he's above us, above the rules. This is what happens when you let arrogance grow unchecked." Phones flashed, neighbors whispered louder, and I realized she was trying to turn them all against me. Not just a fight about a Jeep anymore, but a battle for the entire neighborhood's loyalty. That's when I saw him. Officer Miller. Plain clothes. But I knew him instantly. He walked calmly down the street, hands in his pockets, eyes on me. And for the first time, Karen faltered because she didn't know him. But I did. He gave me the slightest nod, a signal. I nodded back. Karen's voice cracked. "Who are you? This is a private neighborhood." Miller stopped just short of the Jeep. He didn't answer her. He looked at me instead. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded again. "Always." Karen's face twisted. "What is this? Who is this man?" But Miller just smiled faintly. "Just someone making sure things stay safe." Safe. That word landed heavy in the silence. Neighbors glanced at one another. Karen's bravado wavered. I knew then. The game was shifting, slowly, carefully. The truth was leaking through. Not in words I spoke, but in the silence I held. In the presence of someone like Miller. Standing at my side, Karen tried to recover. "This isn't over," she snapped. She spun on her heels, stormed back to her house. Board members trailing behind. But her steps weren't as sharp this time. Her back wasn't as straight, and I could feel it. She was cracking. That night, I sat in my living room. Blinds open just enough to see across the street. Karen's window stayed dark for the first time in weeks. No spying eyes watching me, but I knew she wasn't done. People like her never stop. They twist, they claw, they push until they break themselves. And she was close, closer than ever. The next day, a new letter arrived, not taped to my door, but delivered by certified mail. Notice of pending legal action. Karen's boldest move yet. I held the envelope, heavy in my hands. I didn't even open it right away. I just stared at it, thinking of all the ways this could play out. Courtrooms, judges, neighbors called as witnesses, Karen standing tall with her clipboard, and me, standing silent with the truth no one saw coming. It almost made me laugh, because if she really wanted to drag this into court, then the truth would finally explode into the open, and when it did, she wouldn't just lose, she'd shatter. But I stayed calm because timing was everything, and the timing wasn't quite right yet. Instead, I set the envelope on the counter, leaned back, and smiled, because the longer she pushed, the bigger the fall would be. And deep down, I wanted her to push even harder. The envelope sat on my counter for hours. It stared back at me every time I passed the kitchen. Thick, heavy, sealed with Karen's signature at the bottom. I knew what was inside. Threats dressed as law, paper pretending to be power. But still, I let it sit there, unopened. Finally, late that night, I tore it open. Inside was exactly what I expected. A notice from the HOA board, signed by Karen and her 2 allies. It demanded that I remove my Jeep within 10 days or face legal action in county court. They claimed it was a nuisance. They claimed it lowered property values. They claimed it was non-compliant with neighborhood harmony. Neighborhood harmony. That phrase made me laugh out loud because nothing about this neighborhood felt like harmony anymore, not since Karen had declared war. The next morning, word spread fast. Neighbors walked slower when passing my driveway, their conversations hushed, but their eyes lingered. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with judgment, as if I had brought chaos to their perfect world just by standing my ground. By evening, Karen was outside again, talking loudly to anyone who would listen, her clipboard clutched like a holy book. She waved the letter in the air like a victory flag. "He has 10 days, she announced. 10 days before the HOA takes this to court." Some neighbors nodded nervously, others just slipped back inside their houses. But I stayed on my porch, watching quietly, sipping my coffee, letting her have her moment, because deep down, I knew her stage was about to collapse beneath her feet. Days passed, the pressure grew, more letters, more warnings, more whispers. Even my mailbox was stuffed with HOA newsletters highlighting rule breakers. No names, but everyone knew who they meant. Karen was painting me as the villain, the rebel who refused to obey, the cancer in her perfect little suburb. But the truth was much bigger than she imagined. The 10th day came faster than I thought. That morning, I woke to another letter. This one wasn't from Karen. It was from the county courthouse. A hearing had been scheduled. Karen had done it. She had pushed the HOA into legal battle. I sat at my table, letter in hand, and smiled, because this was the stage I had been waiting for. The day of the hearing was gray and heavy with rain. The courthouse steps slick with water. Neighbors gathered outside, umbrellas bobbing like mushrooms. They weren't required to be there. But gossip travels fast, and nothing excites a quiet suburb like drama in public. Karen arrived first, heels clicking against wet stone. Her hair sprayed into perfect stillness. 2 board members flanked her again, their eyes sharp, their mouths thin. She spotted me across the steps and smirked like she had already won. I walked slowly, deliberate. My boots echoed different than her heels, calmer, heavier. And behind me, I saw him, Officer Miller, plain clothes. Again. But sharp-eyed. He didn't walk beside me. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low whispers. Karen's stack of papers looked taller than the Bible itself. She spread them across the table with pride, like a general displaying weapons before battle. I sat with nothing but my hands because I didn't need paper to defend the truth. The judge entered. Silence fell. Karen launched into her speech before the echo even faded. "Your Honor, this man has violated our neighborhood rules repeatedly. He has refused notices, refused fines, refused to comply with even the simplest requests. His Jeep is an eyesore. It damages property values. It threatens the harmony of our community. We've given him every chance. Now we ask the court to enforce what he will not obey." Her words were sharp, rehearsed, confident. Neighbors in the gallery nodded. Phones scribbled notes. And for a moment, it looked like she had built an unshakable case. But then, it was my turn. I stood slowly, cleared my throat, and looked around the room. "I live in that neighborhood too," I began softly. "And I believe in rules, when they make sense. But what's happening isn't about rules. It's about control. This isn't about grass height or mailbox paint. This is about one person using power to bully everyone else into silence. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Her pen tapped faster against the clipboard. I continued. That Jeep she wants gone? It's not just mine. It's government property. I can't move it. I can't hide it. I can't sell it. It belongs to something bigger than this neighborhood. And if she had bothered to ask instead of attack, she would have known that. A ripple moved through the room. Neighbors exchanged shocked glances. Karen's eyes widened, her smirk faltering. The judge leaned forward. Are you telling this court that the vehicle in question is federal property? I nodded once. Yes, Your Honor. The silence was heavy. Karen stammered. He's lying. He's bluffing. There's no proof of that. And that's when the door opened. Two uniformed officers entered quietly, badges gleaming, expressions unreadable. They walked straight to the judge, handed over a sealed envelope. The judge scanned the papers, nodded slowly, then looked at Karen. These documents confirm it, he said flatly. The Jeep in question is registered to the Federal Task Force. It is classified property. It is not subject to HOA regulation. The air left the room all at once. Karen's face drained white. Her pen slipped from her fingers. The crowd buzzed louder now, voices rising like thunder. She tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time, Karen had no script to read from. The judge banged his gavel once. Case dismissed. And just like that, it was over. Karen sat frozen. Her board members stared at the floor. The neighbors who once nodded at her speeches now whispered behind her back. The empire she built on pink notes and fines crumbled in a single moment. I walked out calmly. Miller gave me a nod as he passed. The rain had stopped. The air smelled cleaner, fresher, like a storm had finally broken. Back in the neighborhood, everything was different. No more letters on my door, no more notes on my windshield, no more blinds twitching at midnight. Karen disappeared behind her perfect curtains, her smile gone, her clipboard gathering dust. And my Jeep? It sat proudly in the driveway, not just a vehicle anymore, but a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the loudest bully can be silenced by the quietest truth. The courtroom victory should have been the end, but with people like Karen, there is never an end, only silence before the next storm. When I returned home that day, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, freer. Neighbors who once avoided me now waved. A few even smiled. Some whispered good job when Karen wasn't around. It was as if everyone had been holding their breath, and now they could finally exhale. But Karen vanished. For a week, her blinds stayed shut, her driveway empty, no clicking heels, no clipboard, no sharp voice echoing across the street. The silence was almost unsettling because I knew she was not gone. She was watching, waiting, plotting her next move. On the surface, life went back to normal. The lawns were still green, the mailboxes still polished, the kids still rode their bikes down the cul-de-sac. But beneath it all, something had shifted. The HOA board was quieter. Meetings were shorter. Fewer violation letters circulated. It was as if Karen's shadow had stretched too far. And snapped, neighbors began to talk to me openly. One woman confessed she had once been fined for leaving her garden hose in sight. An elderly man admitted he had paid thousands in penalties over the years. Just to keep peace, people shook their heads, laughed nervously, and said the same thing over and over again. Karen always goes too far. But while they laughed, I noticed something else. Her house stayed dark at night. And yet, sometimes, I felt eyes on me. A presence. The kind you can't see but can feel on your skin. It made the air colder, heavier. I knew it was her. She wasn't finished. The next blow came in the form of gossip. Whispers spread like wildfire. Karen told anyone who would listen that I had connections, that I had cheated the system, that the court ruling wasn't justice. It was corruption. Some neighbors believed her. Others rolled their eyes. But the poison was there, dripping slowly into the cracks of the community. Then came the letters again, not official this time, anonymous, slipped into mailboxes, typed in block letters. Is your neighborhood safe with federal surveillance next door? Do you want government vehicles parked outside your home? Do you really know who your neighbor is? The intent was clear. She wanted to turn fear into her weapon. If she couldn't beat me with rules, she'd beat me with paranoia. I burned the letters in my fire pit, one by one, watching the flames eat the paper, because fire doesn't argue, it just erases. Still, the tension returned. Neighbors grew cautious again. Some kids avoided riding past my driveway. A few adults gave me polite but distant nods. The shift was subtle, but I felt it. Karen was working from the shadows now. One night, around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. Not heavy, not bold, but soft. Sneaky. I peered through the blinds, and there she was. Karen, standing at the edge of my driveway, her silhouette sharp under the streetlight, her arms folded, her head tilted, just staring at the Jeep. I opened the door, stepped out slowly. The cool air bit against my skin. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't blink. Finally, her voice cut through the silence. "You think you won," she said softly. "But you didn't." I crossed my arms. Looks like I did. Her laugh was quiet, broken. "You embarrassed me, but this neighborhood is still mine. You'll see." Then she turned and vanished into the night. From that point on, it was war of whispers. Passive-aggressive notes slipped under doors, rumors planted at HOA meetings, tiny jabs at neighbors who still spoke to me. She was losing ground, but she was dragging everyone down with her. Weeks passed. The board grew restless. Some members resigned. Others stopped showing up. Without her iron grip, the HOA began to crumble from within. Rules loosened. Fines slowed. People started planting flowers that weren't approved colors. Someone even painted their mailbox bright red, and no one stopped them for the first time. The neighborhood felt alive, imperfect, but alive. And yet, Karen remained. Her house stood like a dark fortress at the end of the street, curtains drawn, lawn perfect but lifeless. No laughter, no warmth, just shadows. Then came the night I'll never forget. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee under the stars, when a neighbor approached quietly. An older woman, eyes tired but kind. She sat beside me and whispered, "She used to be different, you know. Before the HOA, before she became president, she lost her husband. Her kids moved away. The HOA was all she had left. It gave her power. It gave her purpose. And when you took that away, she lost everything." Her words lingered for the first time. I felt something strange, not anger, not hatred, but pity. Because maybe Karen wasn't just a tyrant. Maybe she was a lonely woman, clinging to the only thing that made her feel important. Still, pity doesn't erase damage, and she had caused plenty that weekend. The HOA held elections, for the first time in years. Karen's name wasn't on the ballot. She didn't show up, she didn't speak, she didn't fight. She just vanished from the process. A new president was elected, a quieter man, focused on community instead of control. The rules softened, the neighborhood began to heal, but Karen's house stayed dark. Sometimes, I still see her blinds twitch. Sometimes, I catch her standing at the window in the middle of the night, a shadow of what she once was, a reminder of what power can do when it goes unchecked. And every morning, when I step outside and see my Jeep in the driveway, I smile, not out of victory, but out of relief, because I know, no matter how much noise she makes, no matter how many letters or whispers she spreads, she can never touch it again. For a while, it felt like peace had finally returned. The new HOA president was quiet, fair. The board no longer circled the streets like predators. People planted flowers they actually liked. Kids left bikes in the yard without fear of fines. It wasn't perfect, but it felt human again. And yet, peace in a neighborhood like mine never lasts, because Karen was still there. Her house sat in silence, curtains drawn, lights dim. But silence can be louder than shouting. Every time I stepped onto my porch, I felt her eyes. Every time I walked my dog, I saw her blinds twitch. She wasn't finished. She was waiting. Then, the strange things began. At first, it was little notes. Folded slips of paper slid under my doormat. Not HOA violations. Not official, but personal. Typed in bold black letters. "You don't belong here. You think you won, but you haven't." The neighborhood will never trust you. I burned them in my fire pit, one after another, but more came, always unsigned, always the same rhythm of hate. Next came the whispers. Neighbors told me Karen was calling late at night, spreading stories about me, claiming I was under federal investigation, claiming I was dangerous, claiming the Jeep in my driveway meant surveillance on every home in the cul-de-sac. Some neighbors laughed, others grew cold again. Fear spreads faster than truth, and Karen knew it. One evening, I returned home to find something chilling. A doll, an old porcelain doll, placed carefully on the hood of my Jeep, its cracked smile staring back at me, its eyes painted wide, around its neck. A piece of paper. You can't hide forever. The message wasn't loud. It was quiet, twisted. It wasn't about HOA rules anymore. It was about breaking me from the inside. I picked up the doll, set it in the trash, but my hands shook, not from fear, but from anger, because this wasn't just pettiness anymore. This was obsession. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt louder. Every shadow outside felt darker. I kept watch by the window, eyes on her house. And sure enough, around 2 a.m., her blinds moved. Just a sliver, enough for me to see her pale face watching from the dark. The next morning, another note appeared on my door, this one handwritten, her handwriting sharp and slanted. You may have fooled the judge, but you can. It fooled me. I crumpled it in my fist, because now it was clear. She wasn't fighting for power anymore. She was fighting because she had nothing left. But obsession makes people dangerous. A week later, I heard the sound of footsteps again, late at night, near my Jeep. I slipped outside silently, and there she was, Karen, standing inches from the hood, her hand resting on the metal like she owned it, her face pale in the moonlight, her lips moving as if whispering to herself. Karen, I said firmly. She jumped, spun around, her eyes wild, unblinking. What are you doing? I asked. She shook her head. You don't understand. You don't belong here. None of this belongs here. Her voice cracked. For a moment, she didn't look like a president or a villain. She looked like a broken woman, lost, desperate. I stepped closer. You need to stop this. Her breathing quickened. Her hands shook. Then she whispered, You think the neighbors love you now? You think you've beaten me? No. They're just waiting. Waiting for me to come back. Waiting for me to fix what you ruined. And then, she ran, back across the street, back into her dark little house. After that, the games escalated. My mailbox was stuffed with junk mail, dozens of catalogs addressed to fake names, packages I never ordered appeared at my door. My trash cans tipped over night after night. Sprinklers left running until water flooded my lawn. Each act was small, petty. But together, they chipped away at peace. The new HOA president tried to intervene. He knocked on her door, but she never answered. He sent her letters, but she ignored them. Her power on paper was gone, but her shadow stretched longer than ever. Neighbors grew divided again. Some avoided me, afraid of being pulled into the crossfire. Others shook their heads, tired of her antics, but no one confronted her. No one dared, because everyone knew. Karen wasn't fighting the HOA anymore. She was fighting herself. And when people fight themselves, everyone else gets caught in the wreckage. One night, it reached its peak. I woke to the sound of sirens, red and blue lights flashing outside. I stepped onto my porch, and there she was, Karen, screaming in her front yard, her hands waving wildly, her voice broken with rage. They're watching me, she cried. They're spying on all of us. He brought them here. He brought the government to our neighborhood. Neighbors gathered, staring in shock. The new HOA president tried to calm her, but she pushed him away, her eyes locked on me across the street. This is your fault, she screamed. You ruined everything. You destroyed my life. The officers approached her gently, hands out, calm voices, but she thrashed, screamed louder, until finally, they guided her into the back of the cruiser, her voice echoing down the street as the car pulled away. The silence afterward was heavy. Neighbors looked at me, then at each other. Some shook their heads, others whispered, but no one spoke out loud, because deep down, they knew. Karen had lost her war. Her house went dark for weeks after that. No blinds twitching, no notes, no dolls, just silence. And for the first time, I wondered if it was really over, because with people like her, you never know if the silence means peace or if it means they're just gathering strength for one last strike. After that night, the neighborhood was never the same. Karen's screams still echoed in my head for days, even when the street was quiet, even when her house sat in silence. I could hear her voice. "You ruined everything. You destroyed my life." Her blinds stayed shut, no footsteps in the yard, no notes on my door, no dolls on the Jeep, just silence. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes silence means a storm has finally broken. And all that's left is the wreckage. The new HOA president tried to move forward. Meetings were calm now, no shouting, no threats, no glares across the table. Rules softened even more. Neighbors started to smile again. Kids rode their bikes without fear of notes tucked in their parents' mailboxes. The whole street felt lighter. But Karen's shadow lingered. Some whispered she had been taken to a hospital. Others said she moved in with family out of state. A few believed she was still inside that dark house, sitting alone. Blinds closed, waiting for her chance to come back. No one really knew, because no one ever saw her again. And yet, her presence was everywhere. The cracks in the sidewalk she once measured with a ruler, the mailboxes she inspected with a tape measure, the lawn she scolded for being too yellow. All of it reminded us of her. Every petty rule carried her fingerprints. It made me think about power, how something so small, so meaningless, could consume a person's whole life. It made me wonder if Karen ever truly cared about the neighborhood, or if she only cared about control. Neighbors began to talk more openly now, over barbecues, at the mailbox. During evening walks, stories poured out like confessionals. One man admitted she fined him $200 for leaving his garbage bin out for 10 minutes too long. Another revealed she threatened to sue over Christmas lights. A woman confessed she cried after Karen told her to paint over her bright yellow door. So much pain, so much anger, all bottled up for years, all caused by one person with a clipboard and a smile that never reached her eyes. I listened quietly and realized something. Karen may have fallen, but her damage remained. Still, I knew this too. She would never rise again, because once the truth had come out, once the neighborhood saw her screaming in the street, once the court dismissed her empire of papers and fines, she had lost the only thing that mattered to her, fear, the power to make people afraid without fear. She was just a woman behind closed curtains. Weeks turned into months. The grass grew wild in some yards, and no one cared. Mailboxes leaned slightly crooked, and no one measured. A neighbor built a treehouse that would have sent Karen into a frenzy. Now, people laughed and clapped when it was finished. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on my porch with coffee in hand, the Jeep parked proudly in the driveway, the lake reflecting moonlight in the distance, and I'd think about everything that had happened, how something so small, a simple Jeep, had sparked a war that shook the entire neighborhood, how one person's obsession had turned rules into weapons, how gossip had become ammunition, how silence, patience, and truth had finally turned it all around. I thought about Karen, alone in her dark house, or maybe gone forever, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity. I just felt nothing. Because some battles don't end with winners or losers. Some battles just end with silence. One evening, the new HOA president stopped by. A quiet man with tired eyes but a gentle smile. He shook my hand and said, "We're trying to rebuild trust. People are scared of HOAs now, but we want to make things right." I nodded, because I knew trust would take time. Fear doesn't vanish overnight, but at least it was a start. The Jeep remained, unmoved, unbroken, a symbol now, not of defiance, but of survival, of standing tall when someone tried to crush you with paper and power. Neighbors passed by and smiled at it now. Some even patted the hood like it was a hero itself. It wasn't just my Jeep anymore. It was the neighborhood's reminder that rules can't control people forever. Not when people finally stand together. Still, sometimes, when the night is too quiet. I catch myself looking at Karen's house, at the still curtains, the dark windows, and I wonder, Is she still in there, sitting in the dark, waiting for the day she thinks she can rise? Again? Or has she finally accepted defeat, living somewhere far away, telling herself a story where she was the victim all along? The truth is, I may never know, but I do know this. I will never forget the sound of her voice, screaming in the street as red and blue lights reflected off her perfect little house. You ruined everything. And maybe she was right. Maybe I did ruin everything for her. But maybe everything she had needed to be ruined, because sometimes destruction is the only way to build something better. And as I sit here now, sipping coffee on my porch, watching kids ride their bikes freely, hearing neighbors laugh instead of whisper, I know this street is better, not perfect, but better. All because one Jeep stayed in one driveway and refused to move. But let me ask you this. If you lived in a neighborhood where one person tried to control everything, would you fight back like I did? Or would you stay silent and hope someone else would stand up first?